So we are today wrapping up our 6-part sermon series. Well, we should be, because we're getting closer and closer to Election Day and this heated election season about what's for it and against it. And oh my goodness, we've heard a lot, haven't we? Have your phones been blowing up with countless messages from all kinds of different parties telling you what you should be for and what you should be against? Or every TV program, football game, whatever thing you're watching on TV, you get to see the messages of what these candidates are for and against. But we've been saying not to worry. We're not doing that here. This is not a message or a whole sermon series that's been about, what the politicians or parties, Republican or Democrat, may be for or against. But rather, we have been looking exclusively at or exploring God's Word through a particular prophet. And that prophet is Ezekiel, to find out how we can align our lives for what God is for and what God is against. And a quick review, and if you've missed any of the messages, you're able to find them online, although last week we had a problem just with our sound system. We got that restored, so that's why hopefully we're back live again this week to get the message recorded. But we get to look at what God is for and against, and understand that first week we talked about preaching to rebellious people, and often there's so many prophetic books in the Bible, and so many of those messages, God is sending these messages to people to respond, and they're rebellious. They're breaking God's word, and they're not listening, and so God keeps sending these messages over and over again. Not surprising, the Word of God is still full of all these prophets. Why is it? Is it possible that maybe like the time then, we too are rebellious people and need to hear from the Lord? Now, not surprising, as we've been looking at all these weeks in the New Testament book, the book of Jude, he says, look, we can save people from snatch them from the fire, but we can mix our messages with fear and also with mercy. And that's why when you look at prophets, sometimes the messages may be a little fearful or a little scary when you hear from them, but it's okay, as we're reminded, to mix our messages, to pull people from the fire. Sometimes you need to hear scary things, and people like to watch scary things this time of the year. So sometimes our messages are mixed with mercy and fear. The second week we looked at idolatry. He said, well, that's something we don't deal with today. It's possible we do. If you have any God substitutes, and that's why we said that second week, God is against any idolatry, so we need to eliminate any God substitutes we have. And then the third week, we looked at another against for God, and that was false prophecy, and we said how important it was for ourselves, that each one of you to know the Word of God yourselves, so you know or recognize any false prophecies or whitewashers of God's Word. And we had another last against it, was this false God of self-pride, and it was Peter in the New Testament said that God opposes the proud but shows favor to the humble. They were the three against us, and last week we talked about the second for it, and that was the dry bones to life. That's a beautiful reminder that we saw, and to think about Jesus brings life to the bones of 1 Corinthians 15. You can look up that one. And today we're moving on to the last for it. So we've had now, 3 against it, 2 for it. It's the wrapping up, so we have an equal number of things that God are for and is against, and that is a God who is for things being fully restored. What do we mean by that? Have you ever had any damage done to some personal property of yours? Maybe your home, maybe it's your vehicle, and you've had to take it to get it restored. You had to get to some restoration, to that property. It was just funny, I was talking to Jacob Moritz, who was our former youth pastor. He said just this week he looked up in his ceiling. Have you ever had this happen? And water is dripping from the ceiling. And I'm no plumber, but water's not supposed to come from the ceiling like that. And so he had a leak, and he's in the process. And it's funny, Jacob used to work for a restoration company. So he's going to save his family a little bit of money to be able to do some of that work himself. But if you've ever been part of a restoration process, and even the church is starting to move into that, if you look at our stained glass windows, the windows themselves are in great shape, but the system that we have out in front of it needs to be restored. So maybe over the next year or so, you'll see some restoration work even to this sanctuary, because there's damage that's been caused by that and needs to be restored. So have you ever been part of a restoration plan to see what it is to go to rebuild something? Who knows what to do? Because when you see the mess, if you've seen flood damage, we've seen images, across media right now to things that have happened in different parts of our country, North Carolina and Florida, and you come into something that's been damaged. The flood's over or the damage is done, and you stand there and look at all the mess. What do you do? What do you do with all the mess? Who knows what to do? And that's where these restoration companies, and not surprisingly, we're talking about the one who's the master planner of all things, God today, and knows what to do to restore our brokenness. And we look at Ezekiel, he's given these plans, right? We looked at last week, after the dry bones come into life. That was chapter 37. And now we didn't look at these two chapters. I know some people are reading through this book as we've been looking at Ezekiel. So 38 and 39 talks about God's final victory over his enemies. But then we move into, look at this, restoration plans. The last 9 chapters of the book of Ezekiel, to wrap up today what we're looking at, is God's restoration plans, chapters 40 to 48. Now, it may be a little unclear as to when and where some of the things are supposed to happen, but we'll see and look at this a little bit greater detail that God alone knows, because he's the one who's put the plan together. But looking at these 9 chapters, you'll see. Now, I want you to understand something, though. As we've been saying all these weeks, Ezekiel is this prophet in Babylon, meaning the nation of Israel no longer exists. They are in exile. All these people are sitting in Babylon, that have been carried away and to watch the destruction of the city of Jerusalem and the temple that was destroyed. And time has passed since God left and its destruction. In fact, when you look at chapter 40 of Ezekiel, it tells you exactly in the 25th year of our exile. That's how it starts out. 25 years of exile. How many people can be patient to wait 25 years to hear what the restoration plan is? These people are there, and the Lord comes to Ezekiel and says, here's God's restoration plan, but 25 years of the damage being unrestored. You can lose hope. And we have to wait, and sometimes this is a good message for us too when we look at the scriptures, that sometimes the Lord allows us to wait, sit in the damage to see why it's been destroyed, to let us sit and to kind of be part of it for some time. For 25 years, the people of God thinking, well, this is it. You must have really settled down here in Babylon. We're never going back. But have you ever heard plans of restoration of something you loved? Have you ever seen someone take an old car, Grandpa's old Chevy, and they restore it, make it into something new? Take an old house, and you watch those shows, the different channels, how much they love to do that. They take an old house, and they gut the whole thing, and they redo it, and afterwards, they always take what? A tour of it. Everyone's going, wow, look how nice the kitchen looks. And they showed like the before and after pictures, and you're like, wow, look at that. I want you to get a sense that that's what we're getting here in these chapters, Ezekiel 40 through 48. But there's a problem. You see, if you go ahead and read these 9 chapters, you're going to say, can I say it? Boring. This is so boring, Pastor Mark. It's like all this big description of the temple. And this is important for you to think about. What did the people in exile love? The temple. And so therefore, those sitting in exile, put it in the context of where this is, those sitting in exile for 25 years without hope, all of a sudden Ezekiel comes to them with the plan of something they love. You ever notice that when you love something, you tend to pay attention a little bit more to what's being said or being about? If you love something about the restoration of your old home, you love it. If you go to talk to other people, they're like, that's your home. But this plan that he lays out in these 9 chapters, I want you to put yourself in the place of those people. They love the temple. Why? Because it's there they believe God's presence was. God came down into the people and was with them. Now, consider this. All restoration plans will often include measurements. If you're going to build something, if you hire a qualified builder, you hope before they start cutting things that they measure things. And I know I'm probably one of the worst builders around, but even that whole thing that I know better, that I know if I'm going to cut a piece of wood to make it fit, you have to do what? You measure it to make sure. Measure it more than once, you measure it twice, and then cut. And the other thing that seems to happen too, when you restore something, do you not seem to add improvements to it? If you're redoing a bathroom, you used to have the old rinky-dink shower, but now if you're going to restore it, then you put those like multiple shower heads where like you're going through a car wash and you can turn around. People, you see those restoration shows, they get hit with like 18,000 gallons of water when they're taking a shower. But they make improvements, too, to restoration plans. So I want you to consider that as we take a look at some of this restoration plan that God gives to or through the prophet Ezekiel to a people that have been waiting for 25 years to hear some good news. To them to hear about the place where they used to go, a place where they loved to go. The temple was where they wanted to be because they believed God was there. And the thing that always amazed me about the temple in the Old Testament was, of all the places, the God of the entirety of the universe comes down and confines himself at first into a tent. He goes tent camping with the people. God, the one who created all things, confines himself into a tent. Why? To be with the people. And then when they build the temple, same thing. His Shekinah glory comes down into the temple. No wonder the people loved it. So these 9 chapters of hearing about the reconstruction of the place where they would meet God was important. So let's take a little bit closer look. So in these chapters, you'll see Ezekiel's temple. What's fascinating about this description here is, and all the measurements and all the description of it being rebuilt is, it hasn't happened yet. Now, the temple that was built under Solomon, that was the original one that was destroyed. The one they rebuilt in the time of Jesus when he was at the temple, not this temple. So it's not the rebuilding of the temple of Jesus' time. And so then scholars debate as to what temple are we talking about? Because even if you get to the book of Revelation, the end of the whole story, and you hear about this new temple and the new heaven and the new earth, specifically John says there is no altar there. There's no temple that's present. So what is this talking about? Some scholars debate and they wrestle with it. Maybe the temple that's during the millennial reign of Jesus. But it's something that's calling us to hold out as hope. But he's given this descriptive plan of 9 chapters to the people. But, just like we said, there are some improvements. I was reading in commentary, and I never really thought about this before. Of all the ancient cities in the ancient Near Eastern world, all of them were built really close to water, usually by the river, by the sea, close to it. The ancient city of Jerusalem is not really near any body of water. Did you know that? Oh, sure, it has underground springs and to supply like the water needs and stuff like that, but there is no river there. And in Ezekiel's vision that he's given us these 9 chapters, just like if you were doing an improvement to a shower, there's something much greater given here, and it's this river that flows down through the temple. And we're going to talk about the trees of life and the water of life. It even gives you the side in which it comes out of, this side, over by the south gate, flowing out to the east side of the temple. It's an improvement. Now we've laid the foundation, gave you some measurements, so that now we're ready to hear the word of the Lord. The river from the temple, chapter 47. Back to the entrance to the temple, and I saw water coming out from under the threshold of the temple toward the east, for the temple faced east. The water was coming down from under the south side of the temple, south of the altar. He then brought me out through the north gate and led me around the outside to the outer gate facing east, and the water was trickling from the south side. As the man went eastward, look at this, with a measuring line. See the measurements, here we go. Here comes all the measuring in his hand. He measured off 1,000 cubits. Now, 1 cubit equals approximately 1.75 feet. So we are looking at approximately 1,750 feet of distance. That's approximately, if you do the math, almost 6 football fields, since we're in football season. That's a lot of walking. That's a pretty big distance. So he measures off 6 football fields in his hand, 1,000 cubits. You know what that is either. So then led me through the water that was how deep? Was ankle deep. But then he measured off another 1,000 cubits, another 6 football fields, and led me through water that was knee deep. He measured off yet another 1,000 and led me through water that was up to the waist. He measured off another 1,000, but now it was a river that I could not cross because the water had risen and was deep enough to swim in, a river that no one could cross. He asked me, "Son of man, do you see this?" How could he not? Then he led me back to the bank of the river. When I arrived there, I saw a great number of trees on each side of the river. He said to me, "This water flows towards the eastern region and goes down into the Arabah, where it enters the Dead Sea." Do you know what the Dead Sea is and how salty that water is? You think about swimming in the ocean, it tastes salty. You can literally get in the water there and not drown. You float on the top. That's how salty the Dead Sea is. Nothing that lives there. So this is where this river flows to. It enters the Dead Sea. When it empties into the sea, the salty water there becomes fresh. Swarms of living creatures will live wherever the rivers flow. There will be large numbers of fish because this water flows there and makes the salt water fresh. So where the river flows, everything will live. Fishermen will stand along the shore from En-Gedi to En-Galim, when there will be places for spreading nets. That's how many fish will be there. The fish will be of many kinds, like the fish of the Mediterranean Sea. But the swamps and marshes will not become fresh. They'll be left for salt, because salt had a lot of great purpose. Fruit trees of all kinds will grow on both banks of the river. Their leaves will not wither, nor will their fruit fail. Every month they will bear fruit. How many people have been picking apples recently? People going on the apple orchard. But every month they will bear fruit, because the water from the sanctuary flows to them. Their fruit will serve for food, and their leaves for healing. And we'll stop there. To hear this chapter, to understand one of the last things we're talking about this week is God's for it. And that is for the full restoration of making all things new. That's his business. It's interesting that we live lives that we constantly are trying to look at and restore things that are breaking, falling apart. And it's almost like God's giving this message on a micro scale to look at the macro of what he will do in the future when he makes all things restored, restores all brokenness. And to think about this, let's think about some of God's restoration plan. If you look at the entirety of these chapters, God is looking to get rid of despair and bring hope. There's so much despair in this world, yes, even today, and it seems to be growing, and it seems like everything is lost. But God, through his word and his powerful message, is to give us hope. I hope that when you come here, you receive a message of hope, to move from your despair to hope of what God promises he will do as part of his plan, his restoration plan. God is looking to move broken things to healing, to repair things. So much of restoration is making things work again. And so much is broken these days, is it not? In lives, in cities, in nations, in countries, the world. There's so much brokenness. But God is about healing and restoring. Death to life. We looked at that last week about through Christ, we too will only die once, but then be raised to life. And here's a beautiful example of taking the Dead Sea. If you've ever been there, and we said how salty it is, for God to be able to take something that's so dead that nothing can live and make it a place that's full of life. God is about taking it as part of his master plan, moving from death to life, and then giving us a new earth and a new heaven. But I want you to consider this, and we talked a little bit about this last week and a couple weeks looking at these prophets. One of the biggest problems we have, and I think the people were 25 years after the destruction of the temple, they hear this message of hope, and it still hasn't even come true yet. The near and the far, it seems like it's so far away, and it seems like even when I do, there are times that I get so discouraged and think, God, I'm tired of seeing you lose. I like to see you win some more. And things seem so near and far away, and his promises yet still seem so far away. But let's take it from God's perspective, shall we? Let's go a little bit deeper. Because wasn't what we see in our scripture verses today, Ezekiel gets in the water, and where does it start? Ankle deep. And then it's knee deep, and then it's waist deep, and then he can't walk anymore, and he has to swim. So let's take a look at something. Let's talk about measuring for a little bit, because this is what this whole, those 9 chapters are about, measuring things, if we're going to restore something. But let's take for a moment and say, this is God's measuring line. And he looks down at all of humanity, all of it, all of history, all of time, since the very start of it all. And he can see to the very end of it. So if you're God, and God's sitting here holding, look at this. This is all of humanity, from the very beginning all the way to the end. And sometimes I think when God looks at this measuring line and he sees all of the time and distance, he gives his word to these prophets and messengers of God. And it seems like for us, everything is so far away, but God, looking at everything, we say it, that he is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. God can look at all of human history and be like, I see it all. And for him, let's just say, right here is Ezekiel. That's all Ezekiel sees. And let's say we're here, and this is where we are. Can any of us hop up and take a look at the beginning from the end? Do you think we're anywhere that big? We're confined to this little space on this little line, this little mark that you see here. This is where we are. And yet God looks at the entirety of it. And so when God gives his visions to his prophets, let's remember God's perspective. He sees the beginning from the end. And what I think is so amazing about the smallness of humanity, and yet we have this God is vastly larger than all of us. And think about this. If all of humanity is on this stick, think about everything outside right now. And some of you have chairs lined up in the parade route because you're going to watch a parade today. And if you're on this line, you don't see any of it. Do you see that we worship a God who's like infinity compared to the smallness of humanity? And yes, so when he gives his messages, it can be confusing because God sees the beginning from the end. But one of the most powerful things about God's love for us is just like in the Old Testament temple, God came down in our humanity, limits himself for us so that he gave his people then at the temple a place to worship. And one of the beautiful things that we say about Jesus is, and we'll be celebrating this in just a couple weeks, Emmanuel, which means what? God with us. Same playbook. The Old Testament's plans of restoration, God comes down. Jesus Christ, he comes down. And then the Holy Spirit, which was given to the New Testament church that exists today, the Holy Spirit comes down and lives in us, the temple. And I think that's such a beautiful picture of God. That the enormity of who he is, the kind of love he has for humanity, that he comes down in with all of us and spends that time with us. And it's challenging, isn't it? Because some of us, when it comes to the things of our faith, we only like to get into our ankles. I don't want to get in any further. God measures also another 1,750 feet and challenges Ezekiel to get into his knees. Then he challenges him to get to his waist and go in deeper and deeper. Where are you in your faith walk and understanding the things of God? We somehow think that we can understand this, but there's not a single person in all humanity who knows the beginning from the end. Yet, we worship the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning, and the end. So we heard those words from Ezekiel. You got to see that in the beginning of Genesis, In the very beginning of the Bible, or all of humanity on that stick, he gives this river, this life that produces life, but it's taken away from us. Ezekiel is given this vision of things to come, possibly the millennial reign. But if you go to the end of the story, to the prophet John and his Revelation chapter 21, verse 22 to chapter 22, verse 5, I want you to hear some of this. John says this: I did not see a temple in the city. This is the last two chapters of the Word of God. He says, I did not see a temple in the city because the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb, that Lamb being Jesus, are its temple. The city does not need the sun or the moon to shine on it. For listen to this, for the glory of God gives it light, and the Lamb, Jesus, is its lamp. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their splendor into it. On no day will its gates ever be shut, for there will be no night there. The glory and honor of the nations will be brought into it. Now, some of you need to hear this next verse. Nothing impure, meaning no brokenness, nothing impure will ever enter into it, nor will anyone who does what is shameful or deceitful, but only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, as clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb down the middle of the great street of the city. On each side of the river stood the tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit, yielding its fruit every month. Sound familiar? And the leaves of the tree are for what? For the healing of the nations. No longer will there be any curse. No more brokenness. No more fighting. No more pain. There will be no more night. They will not need the light of a lamp or the light of the sun, for the Lord God will give them light, and they will reign forever and ever in his beautiful heaven. So I want to close up this whole sermon series. One of the things that is still interesting, we live in this day and age where for some reason we still think little signs they put in yards are popular. With all the technology and all the texting we get, there's still signs everywhere. Signs here, read them. And as the pastor of the church, usually this time of year, on our front of our parking lot, which is just a visible place, people will come along and plop their signs down on the church property, telling you to vote for Trump, vote for Harris. They're broken people, just like all of humanity is broken. And it's kind of refreshing because I go out and I get to pick up the sign on the church's property and I throw it in the dumpster. Every one of them, every party. And I often thought, man, one of these years, I'm going to get these Vote for Jesus banners and we're just going to load that parking lot with them. And I know people, it's some political thing, and then they'll automatically think, oh, well, that's Jesus, he's for the right. Oh, that's Jesus, he's for the left. Oh, my goodness, he's for broken humanity. So let me give you a sign that we've been singing about already. One of the things I saw this week on social media, as one of my friends had posted, and I like this sign, because it says this: God's campaign platform, someday, we don't know when. To God, it looks so close. It could be yet so far away. But someday, the King, meaning Jesus, will return. Some of you need to hear this. He won't need to be elected. There will be no debate. There will be no debate. Every knee will bow, and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. I don't know who you vote for, but I vote for that because I know what he's going to do. He's going to make all things new. There will be no more brokenness. There will be no more hurting. There will be no fighting. That is the promise of God. How far away that is, I don't know. But it's the hope that has been given to each of us. Hold on to it. Even after you cast your ballot this November, hold on to the hope that Jesus Christ gives to this world. Would you pray with me, please? Father, we thank you for hearing from this prophet Ezekiel words of the near and the far, words that seem, as we read them, so far off, but there are things yet still to come. We believe that you are the God of the beginning and the end, that you are the Alpha, then the Omega. Father, let us put our hope in you. Every politician is broken. Everyone is corrupt because they live under the curse of humanity. But we believe in you through your Son, Jesus Christ, that all will be made new. That's your plan for restoration of not just this town, this city, this nation, but for the world. That Jesus Christ is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Amen.